Well, I think the market, has still had a remarkably good run in the last nearly 3 months now. And yes, we saw a bit of a pullback last week, but there's still quite a lot of good news in the equity market in aggregate, I think. And we'd be a little bit skeptical about that. We've been cautious on the market because it's one thing to sort of respond to the monetary policy liquidity injections we've had, but ultimately we need to see the sorts of things you've been talking about this morning. We need to see economies reopening and then that demand coming back. And today's going to be a very good example. Just because shops are open, are people going to be in there? Are they going to be spending money? I just think the balance of probabilities would seem to still suggest that this is going to take a lot longer to get back to where we were in January and February. And that makes me think there's quite a lot of good news in the share prices in aggregate at the moment.
And what do you think about the different approaches being taken by the U.S. versus Europe in terms of reopening? They not only took different measures when it came to locking down, but now we've seen the U.S. really open in a piecemeal way. There's been a lack of a centrally planned approach from the U.S. government. But here in Europe, today's a great example. We are seeing travel restrictions lifted across many countries at the same time. So which of those approaches is likely to serve the respective economies better, do you think?
Well, that's a sort of good existential question. I mean, obviously, the issue in the United States is that it's a federal system. So individual states have a lot of autonomy, particularly when it comes to the sorts of policies that have been implemented. So just imposing a national lockdown was probably going to result in lots of legal challenges in a federal system. Here in Europe, you've had divergent approaches, but you've at least had a sort of centralized approach. So countries can close borders, etc. And as you say, they're now starting to reopen it. But a lot of this comes back to the fact that although we talk a lot about sort of following the science, then epidemiology is an extremely complex science. And actually, one of the things that's striking about the virus is that even 3, 4 months into it being a crisis, there's still a lot of uncertainty about how the virus is going to evolve from here, whether or not there will be a second wave. And all of these things, I think, are creating some obvious uncertainty. Whether or not the US approach is better than the European one, who knows? But I think you're right that certainly in the big states like California, Florida, Texas, and Arizona, the pickup in cases there is slightly worrying. And you've certainly had New York Governor Cuomo saying, over Twitter, like, don't make me come down there, when he's seeing videos of people in Manhattan out looking like it's fairly normal. So still a lot to be resolved. And I think that comes back to the market. And, the market's taken a sort of pretty positive approach in the last 2 or 3 months. We think perhaps a little bit too positive an approach.